Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who will finally review an album by The Weeknd. More than that, I have finally, for the first time in my life, listened to a Weeknd album all the way through. In this review of Dawn FM, I'm going to also introduce a whole new feature on my channel. When I listened to this album, these 4 words came into my mind. That are actually 2 words. I listened to it and I just kept thinking to myself, this is a goddamn masterpiece. A goddamn masterpiece. A GDMP. New graphic for 2022. This is a goddamn... Now, what does it mean to be a goddamn masterpiece to me? It's not like an album that's a masterpiece. That's fine. It's not like Donda, where I expect it to be amazing and then it is. Whenever I say that, it's begrudging. It's because I have a previous bias. I either don't like or don't respect the artist who's making this art. Now, I respect The Weeknd, but I haven't liked him for reasons I'll explain. But I listen to it, and it's so good, and it's so powerful, and so well made that all of my previous biases are just snapped in half, and I have to embrace. I have to love. I love Dawn FM. My entire family loves Dawn FM. I already pre-ordered the album on vinyl yesterday, the day it came out. I dropped $50 getting this thing sent to me in April, and I had previously, if you'd asked me, if you'd said, do you like The Weeknd? I'd say, no, not really. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it's begrudging. How did I get here? And I think it'll show why this album is so good and why my opinion has changed. I first heard The Weeknd, like many people did, when I was driving to my girlfriend's house, and I heard Can't Feel My Face on the radio. I hadn't heard the chorus yet, and I heard this amazing, cool, disco, 80s synth pop thing, and it felt fresh and it felt new, and I was just totally moved by it. I thought it was great, and then the chorus came in, I can't feel my face, and I'm like, well, I listened to enough Ghostface Killah. I know that means he's doing cocaine. And so I was like, really? A cocaine thing? And then I learned that it was produced by Max Martin. Max Martin? Britney Spears and NSYNC, Max Martin. Hit Me Baby One More Time, I Like It That Way, Max Martin. Here I was feeling like this is going to be some underground cool guy coming out of nowhere, and instead it's just part of the amazing Swedish hit machine that Max Martin produces. A couple years later, he works with my favorite artist, Daft Punk, and they managed to make great Michael Jackson-like music because he can sing like Michael Jackson and they can produce like Michael Jackson. And there's this great dream, and Starboy is such a great song. But even there, we come back to the cocaine question and clean off the lines out of their face. And I realized now, what I didn't quite realize then, is it's a generational thing. I am a Generation Xer. I grew up terrified of cocaine. Television in the 80s was filled with horrifying public service announcements about the dangers of cocaine, so I can do more coke, so I can work harder, so I can make more money, so I can buy more coke. Movies like Less Than Zero, getting to it soon, would try to terrify us. Pee Wee Herman was telling us not to do crack. It was a very real and scary thing to me growing up. Hell, I grew up in Boston in the 80s, and the future of the Boston Celtics was a young kid named Len Bias who died of a cocaine overdose. So I lived in absolute fear. And in the early 2000s, the 2010s, the attitude shifted. Well, these damn millennials who don't eat at Applebee's apparently like doing coke. And the way that it's talked about in movies and popular culture, as an observer, I saw, like in movies like The Hangover, and in other movies, and even TV, and Panic at the Disco, and all that, all of a sudden, all these little coke references keep coming in. And it bums me out. A super addictive drug that feeds the drug wars that are ravaging South America, that continues to help our terrible war on drugs fill the jail cells of America. Like, everything about promoting cocaine felt scary and bad to me. So I couldn't really support this artist when he felt that way. And going deeper, his whole persona is of the broken man who breaks women. In my whole life, I felt like I know people like this, guys like this, who are like so sensitive and sweet, and they take in the women, and then there's this song that he has that my brother told me about, and I listened to it, called Initiation. It's like he like takes these women, and he like, or these girls even at times, and just like initiates them into his world and gets them addicted and gets them with him, and then leaves them because he's so weak and so hurt, and he's just such a star boy. What can he do? I'm sorry, all these ladies. This whole persona that he has, I feel like my whole life I've been surrounded by these kinds of poser jerks who just hurt people because they are hurt. Hurt people, and that's what it felt like with The Weeknd. So these two things kept me from really enjoying his music. Even when he was self-aware, even though he is quite self-aware, it would still be, I'm still going to keep doing this. I'm still going to keep hurting people. I'm going to keep doing coke and then getting women to do coke and then making them, using them and then discarding them. But what changed? Why am I reviewing Dawn FM? Is this that different? Well, the number one thing that changed, obviously, is Kanye. Hurricane on Donda, I believe, is the best song of the year. The Kanye fan in me who loves his new direction thinks it's not even the best song on the album, okay? I mean, Come to Life is better as like a Kanye fan as to his direction he's going. Off the Grid is better as a hip-hop fan with what he's doing to hip-hop. But just as a pure piece of music, in every possible area, every possible way, Hurricane is a perfect song. So that helped me to have a better association with the vulnerability and the sweetness of his voice that wasn't just Michael Jackson but on coke. Instead, it was like Michael Jackson but now, but more than Michael Jackson. I don't think Michael Jackson has done anything as good as Hurricane. Okay, Billie Jean. But still, like, that's how good it is, and it's through the strength of his voice. The other thing that changed my mind, this album is a goddamn masterpiece. Just listening to it made me excited. I put it on yesterday and I couldn't wait. And just as the strains of the first couple songs came on, and the whole house filled with love and excitement. Like then we listened to it in the car. My wife said, "Can we put this on the Bluetooth so we can listen to it at home?" And the funny thing is, it's still about a guy, a hurt person who hurts people. Max Martin, you want to talk about Max Martin? I went through his old discography. Max Martin hasn't actually worked that much with The Weeknd. But this album, save for a couple songs, Max Martin is on every single song. But whatever it is, they worked it out. They managed to make an album which completely works all the way through. That's not to say there aren't some bad parts to it. It does suffer a little bit, ironically, from Drakeism, which is when an album is too long in order to have extra tracks for the streaming numbers. It is, like all albums which are in this 80s mode, always on the razor's edge of satire. At times, I thought I might be listening to The Night Begins to Shine from the Teen Titans TV show. At times, I thought I might be listening to Martin Sheffield Lickley's Love is a Game from Comedy Bang Bang. Just these kind of like, the line between parody of an 80s song and an actual recreation of an 80s song can be delicate. I think The Weeknd completely succeeds all the way throughout this album with Max Martin, with the other producers. The other problem is, I would say, the features don't entirely work. Now, mercifully, there's only two, and they're two of the greatest artists working, Lil Wayne and Tyler, the Creator. They work on paper, but not quite on wax. But still, what makes this album so great, and made me realize I really should have listened to After Hours. I'm sure I just goofed. I missed that album. What makes this so great, partly, is that it's a concept album, and it's a successful concept album. Bad concept albums are painful. Good concept albums can change your life. The theme of dawn, the theme of the day is about to break, this theme, why am I talking? I'm going to quote The Weeknd that I found on Genius. He says, to picture this album like the listener is dead and they're stuck in a purgatory state, which I always imagined would be like being stuck in traffic, waiting to reach the light at the end of the tunnel. While you're stuck in traffic, they get a radio station playing in the car, with a radio host guiding you to the light and helping you transition to the other side. So it could feel celebratory, could feel bleak, however you want to make it feel. But that's what the dawn is for me. That's a great concept. That's an interesting idea, that we're in purgatory and we're listening to this radio station. It's very, very cinematic. It's very cinematic, and I want to talk about a movie. Now, I should have paid attention to the last album, After Hours, because After Hours is a great 80s movie. But the final track in this album, the final piece of music, not the final outro, is the song Less Than Zero. And it's Less Than Zero that I think provides us the clearest view into why I like this album so much, why my opinion on The Weeknd is changing. And last night, I watched it, okay? Last night, it's streaming on HBO Go, HBO Max, whatever. It's streaming on Hulu. Watch 1987's Less Than Zero. Watch this movie. Watch this movie to understand what The Weeknd is doing. Now, the movie is based on a novel by Bret Easton Ellis. It's fine. It's a story about these two guys and a woman, and the guy comes back from college, and after, his friends who stayed home got in a lot of trouble. His girlfriend slept with his best friend, and his best friend is just plunged in addiction. $50,000 in debt to drug dealers, up all night, constantly breaking people's hearts. A real piece of garbage. We're talking sloppy steaks, just the worst kind of LA super rich dirtbag. And the world in which they live is a world of luxury and emptiness and cocaine and sadness. So if I'm talking to you about a world of luxury and emptiness and cocaine and sadness with people who break people's hearts and are incapable of getting off the ground, I think you understand why The Weeknd is using this as a reference. The strength of the movie comes from a weird fact about it. There was an actor in the 80s. You've probably not heard of him. He's kind of phased out of popularity. His name is Robert Downey Jr. Now, there's another Robert Downey Jr. who's very famous now. He's Iron Man. But there used to be a guy named Robert Downey Jr. in the 80s who was a different guy. This guy was always on fire, was always in jail, was always trying to get out of rehab and go back into rehab. His father was an experimental filmmaker who had a terrible influence on him. This whole story is a very sad story. A very sad story. Thankfully, that Robert Downey Jr. was reborn into the Robert Downey Jr. that we have now. The one who is a great actor, humanitarian, multimillionaire, charismatic guy. I think the way to understand the strength of that movie is that when it was being filmed, Robert Downey Jr. was the character of Julian. That was his actual life. He was the dirtbag who was doing coke, who was falling apart, who was destroying his relationships through his behavior, who was womanizing. He was that. What's the difference between Robert Downey Jr. and Julian? It's not clear. Which ties us to the great art of The Weeknd. What is Abel, his real name, and what is The Weeknd? What is the actor and what is the role? How much of him is this new person who this album says he might become? This album is a lot about rebirth and about making a change and becoming a better person. Will The Weeknd become Iron Man? Will The Weeknd become Robert Downey Jr. Part 2? Will he make it out of this role that he's been performing for us for a decade? This role that is killing him. Of course, it's not, he's killing himself. So that's why I say he is Robert Downey Jr. in Less Than Zero. Because we're watching the performance and the performer at the same time. Now I'm going to use this as an example song. You should have seen a link up there to listen to it. It's one of the best songs on the album. It's a great example of the musicianship here. Max Martin working together with The Weeknd. Upbeat song with some guitar, very sweet, confident singing. Like the chorus, he starts high, but he somehow goes higher, but it's never annoying. How does he sing so high without it ever being annoying? At the end of each verse, there's this beautiful bit with an arpeggiator, which reminds me strongly of Phoenix's album, Bankrupt. And here we have some of the most important lyrics. I couldn't save you from my darkest truth. I know I'll always be less than zero. So that's his feeling. Like he will always be Robert Downey Jr. in Less Than Zero. And the chorus is just this great super 80s pop. Can't get it out of my head. Feelings are crawling to my bed. You'd rather leave me than watch me die in your arms in the movie. well, you have to watch the movie. Death is a big theme in there. Just so many great guitar lines and pop hooks all the way throughout the song with this theme, which I think is what makes it interesting. The movie is really about, it's not really about this girl. It's really about these friends. It's about these friends, Clay and Julian, and the way they've divided, the way they've distanced through one going to college and the other falling into disrepair and falling into a life of just being a scumbag gigolo. But like, the hope is that they could possibly reconcile. And so when he's saying like, you'd rather leave me than watch me die in your arms, I think we can see this song in conversation with Less Than Zero as being a song from Julian to Clay, not a song from Julian to Blair, or a song from Abel to some mystery woman. So there's just some things that are going on. Holy cow, I have to go back to After Hours. I have to do the same thing. I have to watch After Hours and listen to After Hours. I'm sure there's very similar interplay there. Have a sip of my hot honey water. I hope you can't hear my son's doing a Model UN conference virtually, so you might hear him yelling. He's Syria. Hard country to be. So let's go through the rest of the album now, a little bit quicker. Opens up almost monastically with the title track, Dawn FM, his voice. He sings in a minor key and then kind of shifts it up to major. My daughter is a huge Weeknd fan. I asked her what does she feel is the big difference between this album and other ones, and that was the main thing she said. It feels like it's less minor, more major. All of a sudden, the DJ comes on and it's Jim Carrey. Alrighty then. Why is Jim Carrey on this album? First of all, Jim Carrey is perfect for the kind of pseudo-mysticism of this album. If you've ever seen an interview with him, he's a very charming guy. I love Jim Carrey. I think he's a genius, truly. I mean, in every sense. And not because of Man on the Moon, but because of Fire Marshal Bill. I mean, he's just an amazing comedian. But like, he's very into this kind of spirituality. I remember once seeing him do an interview, I think it was with Conan O'Brien. He just started talking about like how row, row, row your boat was the real nature of existence, that kind of thing. But also, he's Canadian. And I do think that matters. I do think that being a Canadian superstar who lives in America does put you in a certain club. And then that made me realize another famous Canadian, Neil Young. My favorite song by Neil Young is called Out on the Weekend, or one of my favorite songs, second favorite song, Out on the Weekend, which is a song very much in the mode of The Weeknd. See the lonely boy out on the weekend, trying to make it pay, can't relate to joy, tries to speak and can't find words to say. Hey, Weeknd, cover on the weekend. Those are Weeknd lyrics way before Weeknd. And even in that song, Neil Young is putting on that kind of personality of kind of a loser guy who can't quite get things straight, can't quite treat women right, is probably doing too many drugs. Anyways, interesting sort of trans-Canadian connection there. And this is where he introduces all these themes of coming out of darkness into light, all of the themes of purgatory and death. What I love about this whole album is the sense that you don't know if the light is salvation or death. You don't know if the light is salvation and death. You know that the light is coming. That's what the dawn means, right? As Kanye's mother would say, it cannot always be night. We know that the dawn is coming. But does the dawn represent death, salvation, or both? And that's a theme throughout the entire album. And hey, Sky from before yesterday, when he finally decided to give up and love The Weeknd, dude, listen to The Weeknd. I know, I get a lot of comments on this channel because I'm a professor and because I'm starting to have a lot of followers, and thank you all. Please subscribe. Please smash the like bucket. But I really do mean it when I say that my ignorance is profound. Like, I don't know so much more than I know about music. And that's part of what I'm trying to do on this channel, is share, somebody who's done a lot of thinking and knows how to put a lot of thoughts into words as I experience all this amazing culture. I feel like I just discovered this artist who has been in the Super Bowl, for Christ's sakes, okay? Somebody who my daughter has liked for years and my son has liked for years, but all of a sudden I'm just discovering it through this amazing album. And it was definitely the next track on the album that got me there, Gasoline. weird British accent. Reminds me a little bit, again, of that kind of satire question. A whole song about existential dread. This is the darkest song on the album, most in what I would associate with this older style about like being high and doing drugs and a woman not being able to hold him. But the thing is, it is so well produced. It is so well produced. It's January 8th, 2022. Will there be a better produced song this year? Will there be? I don't know. I can't believe that there will be. Like, the way the vocals are produced, like doubled, and like this like Kraftwerk style arpeggiated music beneath. If you haven't listened to Kraftwerk's music in the 70s, you're missing a crucial influence on this song. Just these instrumental breakdowns, the way it comes in the chorus, the normal voice that he has with this normal Michael Jackson singing, and the vulnerability that he says, "I love it when you watch me sleep." His whole thing is that he doesn't let anyone close. That's his whole thing. He doesn't let anyone close. So how is he allowing someone to watch him sleep? We're seeing this growth in real time. It is just, it has this funny line, dozing off to REM, trying not to lose my faith. Hey, Weeknd, the lyric is losing my religion, not lose my faith by REM. But still, it leads into that just beautiful, beautiful sweetness. Like true sweetness. With earlier stuff, as with this kind of guy, a broken man who breaks women, they use their vulnerability to hurt women. Like they use it as a way to lure people in, and then once they're in, the abuse can start. Okay? And that's what we're talking about here. That's what this behavior is. This kind of behavior that he was glorifying / talking about, describing, it's abusive behavior. This shows this change where the vulnerability is genuine. And just the traditional Michael Jackson voice, I don't even think about Michael Jackson anymore when I hear it, but he is doing a lot of things that Michael Jackson could do. And then he talks about overdosing and burning his body in the sheets and all that, which is fine. You know, like, it's fine that he's talking about his death. It doesn't feel like, you know, listening to Juice WRLD or something where he feels like he really is going to die. He's open to that possibility, but this doesn't feel like a fatalistic album where he knows he's going to die. This feels like an album where he's really trying to figure out what his life is. The second verse is quite nihilist. He calls himself a nihilist and says he knows there's nothing after this. This is fascinating for an album about the light of death, about the afterlife, saying that there is no afterlife. He sings this with almost a German accent. I don't know. If you have like a weird accent and the word nihilist, do you not just think about Big Lebowski? I don't know. That made me think of the nihilist in Big Lebowski. Flea was one of the nihilists in Big Lebowski. Flea's first appearance in a movie was in Less Than Zero, where you can overhear "Fight Like a Brave" in the back. Total coincidence. It means nothing. I'm losing my mind. It's the instrumental parts that make this so well produced. This chanting in the background, this ridiculously melodic synthesizer, this like percussive sounds, and then electronic breakdown worthy of Daft Punk. Daft Punk is everywhere. This is the best Daft Punk album since Random Access Memories. Like, this feels to me more like a Daft Punk album than an 80s pastiche album. So much of this album has that strength of production and feel and atmosphere that really, this might be the best follow-up to Random Access Memories that there has been. And they're not on here anywhere. It's all Max effing Martin. I want it that way. Tell me why. This guy. How Do I Make You Love Me? The next song. Very kind of going to be starting something feel. Michael Jackson again. Great instrumental percussion with this arpeggiator here. Very bombastic chorus. Another killer instrumental breakdown. Kind of like New Order bass sounds. Like at times it sounds a little bit like New Order. The kind of sparseness of New Order. And this seems to be a love song encouraging a woman to find herself and not let him bring her down, which is quite nice. Which leads next into the song, which is my daughter's favorite song. She made me play it 4 times last night, Take My Breath. She made a good point, which is, speaking of Daft Punk, the melody on here, the opening melody, played on a keyboard, is very similar to the kind of leitmotif Daft Punk would assign to a character in their criminally underrated album, Tron Legacy. Someday, I'm going to do a Tron Legacy video, because A, it's one of the best movies of the century, and B, it's one of the best Daft Punk albums. But the way that this kind of simple melody is written and used is very reminiscent of that. The song is interesting. Take My Breath. It's clear it's a lead single. It makes sense. It has kind of like cool chugging drums, really, really catchy. I saw the fire in your eyes. And the way he says, "You're way too young to end your life." I mean, if you just gave me that stem and said Michael Jackson or The Weeknd, I'd say, oh, that's Michael Jackson. At the end, it has kind of a Giorgio Moroder style, like his work with Donna Summer, which heavily influenced the 80s, heavily influenced electronic music, of kind of a click track going kind of an extended disco electronic feel at the end. Cool, like far left and right panning with the voice. Just so well produced, so deep. Lyrically, though, I do wonder. It seems to be that it's sort of a song about maybe some rough play sexually, like restricting breath. And then taking it a little bit further, saying like actually strangle me to death, potentially in a sexual way, no kind of safe word, that kind of question. But it is weird in the context of 2022. Just because, we live in this age where politically, the strangulation of African Americans by American police officers has been the most significant thing to happen in our country. So I can't breathe. And then we're all scared about dying of COVID, or we're dying of COVID, or we're denying that COVID exists. And that's a question of breath as well. I don't know if this kind of ambiguity is on purpose. I think it is. I think the idea of all of us getting the song stuck in our head and singing, "Take my breath," all around is a weird, odd, amazing, bizarre joke that when cultural historians go back to this time and they go, how did 2022 start? Remember when the second great lockdown was beginning? What were they listening to? Oh, they're listening to this fun little track called "Take My Breath." It's fascinating. What a world we live in. What a world we live in. The big song is called "Take My Breath." And it's COVID. And it's George Floyd. And it's not about either of those. The song's actually about something else completely. Anyways, great album. Next song is called "Sacrifice." A little bit of a step down, I think, from the previous songs. A little bit Michael Jackson autopilot. Again, kind of feeling like gotta be starting something. But I do like how it's very kind of guitar-led, the kind of funk guitar that Daft Punk would use that ultimately came, I think, from Off the Wall. It talks a lot about being born in a cold city. I do like his references to Toronto. I do like the idea, too, of like the sacrificing love for more of the night. He sings it again with a British accent. It's interesting because instead of sacrificing someone else, he's talking about sacrificing happiness to keep following his demons, which I think makes sense. At the end, it's basically Thriller. Like he's even kind of going, "Ow," like a wolf man. Like at the end, you could just do to that. Thriller, Wolfman, Michael Jackson. If you love music, you know what those words mean. They mean what? Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones is the great producer of Michael Jackson's Thriller. When I was in Los Angeles in 2015, we went to the studio. It was awesome. I took my kids. We're all big fans of Thriller. And we took pictures in front of the studio. There's lots of sites like that in America where I think we need to stop going to England and walk around Abbey Road. And we need to go to the studio where they recorded Thriller and just go ah! Quincy Jones is also the most important guest appearance on this album. He has an entire song where he tells about his life. Now, when I first heard this, I thought, okay, Weeknd. I love Random Access Memories as well, so it makes sense. You get a behind-the-scenes person who's just like Giorgio Moroder on Random Access Memories, a behind-the-scenes person. You get him on there to talk about his craft, and then it's clear that you're connecting to the past while making a new way towards the future. The whole thing, I get it. I didn't even need to listen to it, but I listened to it just for fun. And what do you know? I discovered the spiritual core of the album. Along with Less Than Zero, I think A Tale by Quincy provides the clearest path to understanding what Abel is up to here. It's Quincy Jones talking about how his spiritual trauma affected him as an adult. Quincy Jones is a famous womanizer. You know, Rashida Jones is his most famous offspring, great actress, but like, he has a lot of kids by a lot of different women. And it's kind of a thing, you know, like whenever people talk about Quincy Jones, it's always kind of like, hey, yeah, but he gets around. You know, kind of weird sort of known thing about him. So here he is explaining how his mom being taken away, like how that created this sense that he couldn't really trust women and that he would constantly be having bad relationships with women. This is why if a woman got close to him, he'd break away. Sorry, my dog is walking towards. Bo, out. Bo, out. The video's actually it's not almost over, but you just gotta wait. I'm in the sunny room, so he may come back. We'll see. You know, the idea that this trauma in his childhood led to him not being able to trust women, led to his self-destructive behavior. As he says, it is totally subconscious. That's what he says. So by doing this, he's able to actually make a voice for The Weeknd himself. And it's clear that The Weeknd is not the new Michael Jackson. He's the new Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones. He's both of those things. You know, his demons are not Michael Jackson's demons. Thankfully, those demons are unforgivable. His demons are Quincy Jones's demons. And he is fully outlining them, taking responsibility for them, being deferential towards somebody who created his whole sound and his whole aesthetic, right? Quincy Jones is so influential, is so important. But what an amazing thing. What an amazingly smart, forward-thinking thing to do, and what a clear indication that what he's doing is trying to move out of it. The first thing is not to accept that you're messed up. It's to accept that you're messed up and identify why and then move on. Which is why it's fascinating. We had this song, so the previous song made you feel like it was off of Thriller. Then we get the Tale by Quincy, and then we get the song Out of Time. Nice kind of flourishes, Michael, again, kind of like a slow Michael Jackson song, but some flute sounds. And in here, he talks about how he's been working. He says, I've been working on me so much trauma in my life. So here he is. He's not just being traumatized while traumatizing other people. He's talking about this trauma in his life. But he thinks it's too late. The good news is it's not. He's 31 years old? I started seriously working on the trauma in my life when I was 33. And I'm 44 now. You're set. The Weeknd, you'll be able to get out. Knock it off with the drugs. You should be able to figure it out. And then we have this amazing interlude with Jim Carrey. Very creepy and cultish. And he talks about before you dwell in that house forever. He's 3 more minutes of easy listening. And we lead to the song, Here We Go, ... again. One of the few songs not produced by Max Martin. Boy, is Max Martin kind of playing the Quincy Jones role on this album? I think he is. Jesus. Is Max Martin the most logical inheritor of Quincy Jones's crown? It's giving him too much credit. It's an interesting question, though. Very super gentle intro here, almost gospel vocals in the back, more Daft Punk style keyboards. He actually even mentions the Super Bowl, but in this song he's doing his kind of singing, rapping thing. And this is what's fascinating about The Weeknd to me is, by his biography is very similar to that of many rappers, or Canadian rappers or French rappers, right? Like rappers from countries where people of color traditionally come from first, second, third generation immigration as opposed to centuries of slavery. Like, his story is very similar to that of a rapper, abandoned by his father and kind of growing up in chaos and getting into drugs and getting into trouble, except instead of being a good rapper, he has a voice which was just sent from heaven, right? He just has this insane, beautiful voice. So I do like this rap sound here where he's just kind of singing, and it has this weird kind of second part with bells. And then all of a sudden we have Tyler, the creator, coming in, singing along, very in keeping, but an odd way. He's talking about how no religion or state can sanction our love. And he talks about signing his prenup. Very, very kind of weird way to end a love song. The Weeknd makes his own radio stinger, and that leads into Best Friend. Best Friends, kind of ominous low bass stabs, kind of funky, oh yeah voice. He uses his voice to just power through the song. Like his voice is just carrying everything. The song's a little bit unremarkable, but his voice just carries everything. And 808 comes in eventually. This whole question about can you have sex with your friends and do you lose your friends? Kind of a weird outro stinger on this one, which leads into Is There Someone Else? Which has a nice opening with this kind of pitched up voice sample. It might just be The Weeknd himself, but I don't know. This is that Drake-itis I'm talking about. This feels kind of like filler. Now, fortunately, it leads into Starry Eyes, like seamlessly. You can't even really tell they're two different songs. I like this song a little bit more. It has this sort of like talking about going from being starry-eyed to being cynical, and taken together, the songs are good. But individually, they feel a little bit too much like filler. Every Angel is Terrifying, another non-Max Martin song. And this is just a weird one. Has this kind of angelic chorus. It's the most kind of Kanye sounding song in terms of its modular construction and just sort of like all these weird notes. Kind of arpeggiator comes in. It's a beautiful concept. Every angel is terrifying. That like if you're dying and you see an angel, it is terrifying. And he sort of talks about his own album in a cinematic way at the end. Like it's Afterlife, the movie, is the fake commercial he puts on at the end. But it does seem to be about this album, just about this like experience you've never seen before, and all about this concept of being taken out into life, taken out into the afterlife. Don't Break My Heart is the next song. Another kind of filler song. I don't know, kind of Freaks Come Out at Night by Houdini, which I like that. But the chorus, Love is a Game, I don't know. I Heard You're Married, fortunately picks things up. Kind of more of a 70s feel, Ohio Players, kind of feel. Lovely descending melody in the verse. It's weird because, he's really upset that this woman he's with is married. Like, I can't be with you because you're deceiving me. So it is odd that somebody who's so proudly polygamous, for lack of a better word, is now upset about this. I suppose this shows a change. I can't be with you. And then Lil Wayne comes in. I just don't know what to say about this Lil Wayne verse. Like, why is he here? Like it already strange credulity that like we should care about The Weeknd being upset about being with a married woman. But given Lil Wayne's persona, I don't know that much about Lil Wayne, but I don't think he's on this kind of character arc of like now he's a serious person who wants to find real love. So it doesn't quite work. And Tell Hubby I'll Kill Him, no hubcap, is funny, but that's a pretty corny line. I do like the guitar line in the outro. The next song is Less Than Zero, which I've already discussed. And then Phantom Regret, a beautiful synthesizer here, and just Jim Carrey just talking all the way through. Basically Jim Carrey rapping, now that all future appointments have been postponed. Were you just high? Were you stoned? I do think this is kind of a COVID thing as well. All our future appointments are postponed. That's also what happens in death. It's a reckoning about your own life. You have to wait here and you have to go through it. And the image of life itself as a form of purgatory before you can die was quite interesting. So there it is. There's my review of this goddamn masterpiece. Now, I don't know if it's a certified goddamn masterpiece. I'll tell you at the end of the year. It might just be an initial take. But it's just an amazingly well done, well-structured album. Also, just putting a little point here. Just a weird thing I realized. I grew up in the 80s. So I was afraid of cocaine, and I felt bad for Ethiopians. That was a thing. Ethiopia is going through a major famine. And the fact that we have The Weeknd is thanks to immigration. And the thing about non-American hip-hop is that often it's made by first, second generation immigrants, as I said. And I think it's just important to remember the cultural richness that comes. That I don't get political on this channel very often, but when I do, it's when it pertains to music, whenever possible. And a reason to just, keep those borders as open as possible. Like we owe it to the people. I mean, the result of colonization or unrestrained free market capitalism that's put all these pressures on the world, the result of the drug trade, this is what needs to happen. We need to give opportunities. We need to share what we have that we partially got from exploiting other people. I don't know. That's a controversial point, but I did just sort of want to say it because it is germane to the topic. These are my Patreons. I got so many Patreons now. Oh my God, you guys are just killing me. It's unbelievable. I have to like go all the way back here. Okay, I'll have to do like this right here. So, these are like different layers. So what happens is when people give me money, I have a full-time job. So I'm not like, I don't do this. This is just a hobby that I picked up in the lobby. So, I don't have to worry about it. But I don't have enough money to buy all the music I want. So these people help me out with that. And thanks to that, I was able to buy the Weeknd yesterday. And so I bought the LP and I bought a signed CD that they're selling on the Weeknd site. And that's going to be a special gift for my wife, the Dr. and Mrs. It'll get here right around the time of our anniversary when we started dating. Also, if you like my mug, you can buy my merch. But whatever. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoy watching After Less Than Zero with Robert Downey Jr. I hope you enjoyed this. And until next time, I'm going to turn this video off and I'm going to start listening to the album again. There's the camera.